Welcome back, everyone, to the Chaos Ball Podcast Divisional Preview. Season rolls on. Last week, the AL Central Preview. This week, we got two. I say we, like it's not just me doing this. I have two more for you this week. Today is Tuesday. The next podcast will likely be Friday. It'll be Friday or Saturday, most likely Friday. But today, we're focusing on the lovely division out east, the National League East Division. I've determined this to be... So I did the AL Central first, rationale-wise, was because I deemed it the division likely with the least free agent movement for the rest of the offseason with the big free agents. I was going to hold off on the NL Central for a while, but I might end up doing that next week because I was basically just waiting for the Cubs to do something, and they signed Cody Bellinger, so that's at least one free agent off the table. And Jordan Montgomery and Blake Snell and Matt Chapman, I guess, are the three big-ish players left. I guess JD Martinez and a couple other guys, but I am doing the NL East today because I don't really see it as super likely that any of those three guys go to any of these teams, to be honest. Like, I mean, the Mets potentially, because Kodai Senga just got hurt, but they have already spent so much money. Like, maybe they do just throw a bag at Jordan Montgomery and Blake Snell and make me look foolish. But I'm going to do the NL East anyway, because at least the other teams, I don't really see the other teams forking over the money for these free agents, to be honest with you. And then I will be doing the AL West this week. So Friday or Saturday, the AL West preview. Without the Mariners have their own. That will be the last preview. So the AL West will just be 4 teams, a little bit shorter of a podcast. Probably. I can't promise anything for you. But let's just crack into it. Let's just get cracking on the NL East. And we're going to start, as I like to do, with the projected worst team in this division, the Atlanta Braves. No, I'm just kidding. The Washington Baseball Nationals. The Washington Nationals, what did they do last year? Actually not as bad of a season as people expected them to have last year. I feel like I took the under on their win total last year. It was in the 60s, and they ended up winning 71 games, which was a honestly great success for the team that they threw out there most of the year. They went 71 and 91, and their Pythagorean record was 67 and 95. And this was good enough to still get last in the division. The Mets were close. The Mets were close to them. And if the Nationals passed the Mets, oh boy. But no, they did not. They still took last in what was, I mean, this is a tough division. You got some good teams in here, but they really weren't good. I think there were a couple good things to take away from the team last year that I'll get into. But this season, what are they projected at? According to Pacoda, they were projected to go 58 and 104. Dakota really doesn't like them, with a 0% chance for playoff odds. I've noticed in Fangraphs, even the worst teams, and you'll see with even this team, Fangraphs generally gives teams even a little bit. Like, they're giving the Nationals 0.3. Zips is giving them 0.3% to make the playoffs. Pacoda just says, nah, fuck that. 0. You're not making the playoffs, pal. And you'll see, I don't think they give 100%, but they've given zeros, and they're kind of ruthless, that system. Fangraphs is projecting them to go 66 and 96, so a full 8 more wins Fangraphs is projecting them to have than Pacoda, which is a pretty considerable margin. I think the biggest margin that we've seen so far, because the biggest margin from both projection systems last time out was, I think, the Royals, and it was 6 wins. So 8 wins, pretty substantial difference there. But still, the high end of their projection is 66 wins. That's not good. That's essentially the same team as last year. And, I mean, I can see why. The free agents that they lost, not a whole lot of stuff here. They lost Carl Edwards Jr., relief pitcher, which they've somewhat replaced in the in the bullpen. Michael Chavis, the Ice Horse, who is signed a minor league deal with the Mariners. Chad Kuhl, Dominic Smith, Corey Dickerson. I mean, Corey Dickerson, I guess, played a decent amount last year. And Victor Arano, another relief pitcher. And they added a couple of free agents. Actually, don't hate the free agent additions that they made. They added Joey Gallo, Dylan Floro, relief pitcher, who Dylan Floro has been a very stable and consistent relief pitcher for the past 4 or 5 years, I feel like. Without even looking at his stats, I feel like he's just been a good reliever for a while, which makes me think he's going to be bad for this national team because, boy, relievers can crumble quickly. And then the only other major league contract they signed this offseason was Nick Senzel, a former top prospect of the Reds who started to play a little bit better baseball the last couple of years. Really was a disappointing prospect coming up with the Reds. But he's more or less a utility man who is slated to be their starting third baseman this year, which is kind of bleak. But he's basically become a utility man. He can kind of play all the outfield positions and third base now. Maybe they'll sign Matt Chapman. That would be very funny if they'll sign Matt Chapman. But what does their lineup look like? And they made no trades. They made 0 trades this offseason, which is great for me. It's a little bit less work. But lineup-wise, Fangraphs is projecting their lineup as follows, 1 through 9. C.J. Abrams at shortstop, Lane Thomas in right field, Joey Gallo in left field, Joey Meneses at first base, Jesse Winker, batting fifth, hit at the DH spot, Kybert Ruiz at catcher, Nick Senzel at third base, Luis Garcia at second base, and Victor Robles in center field. That is not very good. That is just simply not a very good lineup. I will say it. The highlights. If you need a reason to turn on the Nationals, C.J. Abrams. Really, that's one of my big questions this year is, can C.J. Abrams take a big leap? And he is my 2024 X Factor for the Nationals. He had a really good second half last year. He kind of muddled along in the first half and looked more like the C.J. Abrams we had seen make his debut. And then in the second half, he really had a solid second half of the year at the plate. He started to walk more, strike out less. He started hitting the ball with more power to the pull side, which is a super good sign. Like the pull side power specifically was really, really impressive from him because he's not that big of a guy and he's really fast. And so if he can add that pull side pop to his game, that raises his ceiling tremendously for the amount of speed that he provides on the base path. And he is, he's projected to have the most WAR on this entire team, actually, with 2.5, which tells you a lot about this team. But I think he's definitely the one to watch. You look at his numbers last year overall, pretty underwhelming, but again, very good second half. Another guy who had a good second half with a little bit of a smaller sample, who's not on the projected starting lineup, is elite name alert, Stone Garrett. Stone Garrett, I think, has the opportunity to be the best hitter on this team, to be honest with you. He's an outfielder, and he is hurt right now, so the reason he's not on the opening day lineup is he is currently hurt. I don't know how much spring training he's going to play, to be honest with you. It was his ankle. I think he's ramping up to play, and I don't know if there's much more news on he's ramping up to play in spring training soon. So hopefully he'll be on the opening day lineup. But I think now Jesse Winker's a starting DH. I just think they should start Stone Garrett there. He just, even the full sample of last season, 89 games, 30% strikeout rate, very high, around 10% walk rate, but a 115 WRC plus. He showed some pop. He had 9 home runs in those 89 games. I just feel like they're better off, and I think Stone Garrett is just going to take the DH role. But I'm sure he'll play the corners. I don't think he's particularly good defensively in the corners, but they don't have a whole lot of, I think he'll probably play a decent amount of left field with Joey Gallo out there as well. What doesn't help Stone Garrett is the fact that they signed Joey Gallo to a major league contract where Jesse Winker is on a minor league deal. So that's why I feel like DH could be the spot for him. But if they want to do full platoon in left field with Joey Gallo and Stone Garrett, he's a right-handed hitter, they could do that. I like his bat. His projections for this year are they're good. Well, are they good? No, they're modest. They don't really believe in him, but I feel like he's a pretty good hitter. He had a good second half. I don't know. There's something about him. I feel like I'm just eating the garbage because he has a fun name. And then the other offensive piece here I'll talk about, I guess. I mean, Kyber Ruiz is a very weird catcher. He's a very hit tool catcher. Like, he's a potential hitting for average guy with not a whole lot of power, and I don't think his defense is that great. It doesn't grade out well. And then I do like Lane Thomas. Lane Thomas in right field. I think he has been the best hitter on this team past couple of years, probably 2 years. I mean, last year he posted a 109 WRC plus, which is like fine. He just he strikes out a little over league average, doesn't walk a whole lot, but when he hits the ball, he hits it really hard, which I just like those type of hitters. So if he can manage to walk more, I don't even think he needs to cut his strikeout rate. He's kind of a Julio E type of hitter where he'll strike out a lot. I'd love to see more walks from him, but when he hits the ball, he hits it really hard. He hits it very hard, and he has a decent amount of speed to steal bases. He stole 20 last year, 28 home runs in 157 games. Like, I think he's just a good hitter, good solid hitter, and I like Lane Thomas. Just if he could be a legitimately great player if he gets on base a little bit more, because the way he impacts the baseball is good for what he is right now, and he's still very young. A lot of this team is quite young. I mean, Lane Thomas he's 28, but he's still on his rookie deal. I think he's just hit arbitration. And that is kind of the offense. The only other players I have questions about are prospects from the offensive standpoint. Like, one of my questions for this team is Dylan Cruz and James Wood. Do we see them at all this season? Like, I would assume we'll see them in September no matter what, because I don't think this team's going to be good. But do we see them earlier than that? Like, if either of them just rake in the minors for the first month or two of the season, there's not a whole lot of guys like in front of them in the outfield. I mean, you have like Victor Robles can play center field well. He's not good at the plate at all. I don't know if Dylan Cruz is really going to be a center fielder, but why not try him out there? James Wood would probably be more of a corner guy. I'm sure a lot of you know Dylan Cruz. He was so famous last year leading up to the draft, just in college. But James Wood is of the O'Neill Cruz, Ellie De La Cruz mold. He is like 6'6", huge lefty bat, huge power. Just looks like it's hard not to compare him to O'Neill Cruz. But they play different positions, shortstop compared to corner outfield. I don't really know what the consensus is on James Wood's defense in the outfield. To be honest with you, I think it's like okay, and if he can hit as well, like if his power is legitimately like 80 grade, if he can live up to the power hitting hype, doesn't matter what his defense looks like at all. Honestly, like I think his ceiling is like elite bat, like Jordan level bat. And do we see them this year? I hope so. I'm assuming in September we will, but we'll see. And then moving on to the very underwhelming, honestly, I think the offense is better. Oh, the offense, the last thing I'll say about the offense, not a lot of walks in this offense. All of these guys, except for like Jesse Winker, are going to post sub-league average walk rates and a lot of contact. So the Nationals I feel like they're attempting to build a dead ball era type of offense, which is a bold choice in the year 2024, but whatever, you do you. And the pitching, honestly, it's not good. I mean, Josiah Gray and Mackenzie Gore are the 1-2, and those guys are the 4-5. Maybe you can convince me Mackenzie Gore is a 3 starter on some teams. they're not very good. I like Josiah Gray. I'll be honest. I like him. He's not an ace. I feel like he's a solid big league pitcher. And Mackenzie Gore, you were hoping to see a little bit more from him last year after being one of the biggest guys to get back in the Soto deal, along with Abrams from the Padres, and he was just mediocre last year. I think his stuff looked pretty good. I think this is a key year for him. He pitched a lot last year at a very league average clip. So you're hoping to see him take some sort of step this year. The projections like him to be a little bit better than league average as a pitcher this year, so I hope he can be that. His stuff is pretty good. I want to see him be a good pitcher. And then after that, it's Jake Irvin, Patrick Corbin, and Trevor Williams, which Jake Irvin, is he a rookie? Is he a rookie? I don't know much about Jake Irvin. No, he's not. He was a rookie last year. I didn't know if he pitched enough last year, and he did. I don't have much to say about Jake Irvin. And then Patrick Corbin, you know him as one of the worst free agent deals of all time. Probably he's cooked. And Trevor Williams, same deal. Older. I feel like he's cooked. Not going to provide much besides innings. And then you get to the bullpen. They have like two solid relievers, maybe. Like Dylan Floro. I feel like the collapse is coming. And the fact that they signed him maybe speaks to other teams didn't want to touch him. But again, he's been for like 5 years since his Dodgers days. He's been a pretty solid relief pitcher with a good amount of innings of work and really solid output. His raw stats didn't look great last year, but the peripherals did. So maybe Dylan Floro continues his pitching well and gets traded at the deadline. That's probably the best case scenario for him. And then Hunter Harvey is really good. Hunter Harvey is a really good relief pitcher that I don't think a lot of people know about because he's on the Washington Nationals. He has for the past 2 years has been really solid for this team. I mean, let's see, what's he averaging out at? Like the past 2 years, 10K per nine with like 2.5 walks per nine, which is really good for a relief pitcher. Last year, he posted a 2.82 ERA. The year before, a 2.52 with FIPS of 3.34 and 3.4, respectively. Just a really solid relief pitcher. Really, really good high-velocity fastball, and just a really solid relief pitcher. And he's entering his later stages of arbitration, so if he continues his good pitching, do they hold on to him? Do they extend him? Do they trade him? They could probably get a decent amount trading him at the deadline, just thinking about it. And then Kyle Finnegan, the other like solid, I would say, relief pitcher here. As much as you can say a relief pitcher is solid, like Kyle Finnegan has been a good enough relief pitcher the past couple of years on this Nationals team. Another guy I could see them just trading if they're really bad at the deadline and those guys are pitching well. That I don't have much else to say about this Washington Nationals team. They're underwhelming. Like, my questions are, do we see Cade Cavalli at all post Tommy John surgery? He was a former top pitching prospect for them. I don't know. He had TJ at the start of last year, so I hope we see him this year. His upside is pretty good. I don't know about after TJ, but his upside is enticing. And then this team was like almost a 500 team, crazy enough, in the second half of last season. Was that for real? I don't know. I don't think so, to be honest, but I feel like a lot of it kind of hinges on development of CJ Abrams, Kyber Ruiz, Mackenzie Gore. Like, can Lane Thomas just continue being a good hitter? I don't know. The floor is low on this team. The upside is 70-ish wins, maybe. Their over-under, according to DraftKings, is 66.5, and I'm just going to safely take the under here on 66.5 and call it a day for the Washington Nationals. So that's that. Let's move on to the next team projected to get fourth in this competitive division. The Miami Marlins, one of the weirder teams of 2023, I would say, just had I guess you could call it a fun differential type of year. They ended up 84-78. And if you recall, they took third in this division. They were a wild card team. They lost the wild card to the Phillies, but I mean, they got to the playoffs. Their Pythagorean record was 75-87, which all year they were winning extra inning games and one-run games constantly. Like, I think they lost one extra inning game last year, and then they went 7-3 in extra innings. I feel like they lost those 3 extra inning games in September. That's what it felt like. It felt like they couldn't lose a one-run game or an extra inning game. They went 33-14 in one-run games, a 70% win percentage in one-run games, which is absurd. I don't think it was completely luck, to be honest. I think it is a little bit how this team is constructed, and it's not super different this season. Just looking at it, it's a team with, there's some upside in this offense. I think it's pretty balanced at the top of this lineup. But the class of this team last year and going into this year is the pitching. Both the rotation and the bullpen is the absolute class of this team. I think this is the best pitching staff in the division. I'll say it. I'm not afraid to say it. I think their pitching staff is better than the Braves. Well, maybe. I haven't thought this through. That was off the dome. But my point is, it's really good pitching staff, and it was really good last season. And the key missing piece in this year is Sandy Alcantara. There's many ways to say his name, but the point is they will be without him all year. He got Tommy John at the end of last year, which really sucks. But even like he won his Cy Young, and then last year he threw a lot of innings. It wasn't quite as good as 2021 or 2022. Still, he had a really solid year, but it wasn't the Cy Young type we had expected from this year, and his peripherals honestly matched his raw numbers, so I don't think he really got super unlucky. I think he just gave up a lot more home runs this year. He walked a little bit more guys. His velocity and stuff didn't change, but got Tommy John, so he will be missing out on the 2023 season. But I mean, you just heard what I said. I still think this pitching staff is really, really good. And even without him, I think it's going to be a really tough rotation and bullpen to get through game by game for anyone playing this team. But I'm getting ahead of myself. What are their projections? They are projected to go 80-82 on Fangraphs and Pacoda. There's an agreement. Now, I say this, Pacoda does do decimals, so I round up generally. So theoretically, they are projected to go 80.3 and 81.7 according to Pacoda. And then Fangraphs does the same thing, and I round up. And on Fangraphs, 80.4 to 81.6. So they disagree by a tenth. So that's as much of a consensus as you're going to find between these computers. And they weren't especially active this offseason. They made a couple trades this offseason that, I mean, they're not super moving the needle type of trades, but they made a couple trades at the deadline last year that will inform what their team looks like this year, because they traded for Jake Berger and Josh Bell. And both of those guys will be a vital part of this lineup again, a very integral part of this lineup this year if they want to make the playoffs again, and I think they definitely can. I think when your team is projected to be mid, I think that's not the end of the world, because it's baseball and anything can happen. I think there's a couple key factors that could really determine that with this team, but I think the floor of the team is high by virtue of the pitching staff. And The hitters aren't bad. There's plenty of upside here, but I think obviously their weak point is the offense, and I don't know especially how they're going to address it. I mean, I'm wondering, one of my big questions is, will they be buyers again at the deadline? They would probably have to trade from their pitching because they really don't have the prospects to do it. They're, according to Keith Law, their farm ranking is 28th, which is that's not good. If you don't know, there's 30 teams in Major League Baseball, so being 28th in something is not good, really. But it's an interesting team. Top down, here's how their lineup reads. Luis Arraez leading off at second base. Tim Anderson, who they recently signed, they have him at starting shortstop. Josh Bell at first base. Jake Berger at third base. Jazz Chisholm in center field. Brian De La Cruz in left field. Jesus Sanchez in right field. Avisail Garcia at the DH spot. And Nick Fortes at catcher. That is an okay lineup. I think the 1 through 5 is good. I think Arraez, Tim Anderson, who knows? But like Arraez, Bell, Berger, Chisholm is a pretty decent 4 to have in the top of your lineup somewhere. And then Brian De La Cruz and Jesus Sanchez. Brian De La Cruz didn't exactly build on the strong opening he had in 2022. And I predicted last year he was going to have a really big breakout year, and he didn't really. He had a okay year, essentially league average at the plate. And then Jesus Sanchez also is another guy who I think has a good amount of upside and can provide them, hopefully, some more power than he did last year. He has a tremendous amount of raw power. Only hit 14 home runs last year in 125 games. I just would expect more power from him, to be honest. Like, he's just a very big dude, and I expect more than 14 home runs. I think there's plenty of upside here. I think this offense is full of upside. I think you know what Luis Arraez is. Absolute unicorn player, good leadoff hitter. You know he's going to hit for average and not chase pitches and not whiff on pitches. Tim Anderson, I think it's fine for them. It's fine for a team to take a flyer out on Tim Anderson. Like, hey, maybe change the scenery. He can recapture his form. But for a team like the Marlins, who are seemingly trying to like make the playoffs or win baseball games again, like they did last year, I don't know how I feel about that. Of him being slated as their everyday shortstop with no real good backup, unless they wouldn't move Jazz Chisholm to shortstop. Probably not. They have like John Birdie and Vidal Brujan, who they got from the Rays in a trade this offseason, who former top prospect, one of the Rays' top prospects, who hasn't exactly lived up to the hype just yet. I just don't. Shortstop I feel like is just going to be a hole for them this year. If Tim Anderson can play good defense and they can hit him at the back of the lineup, I think that is fine. But I do think it's at least intriguing to have him hit at the top of the lineup with Luis Arraez, because that could potentially give you 300 average hitters at the top of your lineup, which is pretty unique in today's game, I would say. And then Josh Bell and Jake Berger as some thumpers behind those guys. And then Jazz Chisholm is slated in to hit fifth, and he is my 2024 X factor for the Marlins because he's just been somewhat underwhelming in terms of the expectations that are placed upon him. He's projected for a 2.6 WAR season, perfectly fine, perfectly slightly above average season. That's what he's projected at. He's the X factor because if he blossoms into an elite player this season and puts up a 4-5 WAR season, like a top 30 season in baseball, I think that could really propel this team to the playoffs. I think the lineup is good enough, and he is obviously the one with the biggest upside here. De La Cruz and Jesus Sanchez right behind him with plenty of upside, and then the other hole in this lineup is DH. I would expect Josh Bell to DH a little bit with Arias playing first base, but then that leaves a hole at second where like maybe they try out Vidal Brujan for a little bit there. I don't really know. That's a hole because I don't expect really anything out of Avisail Garcia at the plate in 2024. So that is potentially a position they might address. And they don't really have any, I don't think they really have any guys like ready to make their major league debut who are supposed to be really like good hitters who can slot in the DH. Like they have Max Meyer, who's a pitcher, who's probably he's their second ranked prospect, who's the closest to the majors. Like Victor Mesa, he's an outfielder. I don't know where the reinforcements are coming from this offense, and that is a big flaw in this team, is the depth of the offense as well. And then to round out the offense on the end, Nick Fortes is not a good offensive player at all, but he's a very good defensive catcher. He's a good defensive catcher, kind of a weird defensive catcher. He's a good pitch framer, not like one of the best, but he's an above average pitch framer, an elite blocker, which I think plays honestly really well into the rotation of absolute flamethrowers, and a few of them don't exactly know where it's going all the time. So I feel like he's the perfect catcher for this team, and they don't need him to hit. They know what he is. They're not going to expect him to hit. He's going to be in the 9-hole. Really good catching this pitching staff, and that's all they're going to need from him. But moving on from the offense, the pitching staff, again, like I talked about, is where this team is going to shine. They have it, Fangraphs has it organized into the ace, Jesus Luzardo, then Yuri Perez, the young unicorn, who's like 7 feet tall, then Braxton Garrett, Edward Cabrera, and Trevor Rogers. The 1, 2, 3 here, Jesus Luzardo, Yuri Perez, Braxton Garrett, is nasty with the tremendous amount of upside. Jesus Luzardo really has come into his own from getting traded from the A's as a up-and-coming young pitcher. Yuri Perez, we saw last year, they really limited his innings last year, but in the innings he pitched, he was super promising and I think has unlimited upside as a pitcher. One of my key questions this season for this team is like, can Yuri take over Luzardo as the ace of the squad? Like, he might. I think the sky's the limit for this guy. And then Braxton Garrett, who I feel like is not super well known nationally. Again, I think it's one of those things where he plays on the Marlins, so it makes sense. But just got better from 2022 to 2023. Pitched more innings, looked really good. Is not the mold of this rotation. He doesn't throw super hard, but his stuff's really nice. Good command on his pitches. Doesn't really walk a lot of guys. And then the back of this rotation is what's interesting to me. Edward Cabrera, a young arm. He's a rookie last year. And his stuff is insane. His stuff is absolutely electric. He just has no idea where it's going. I hope he can find some command because his stuff is so nice. I mean, he wasn't even that bad of a pitcher last year. He threw 100 innings, 4.24 ERA, which is right around like league average for a rookie. That's not bad. Was he rookie eligible last year? He pitched enough in 2022. Maybe he wasn't. But either way, young pitcher. He's 25. Really, really nice fastball slider combination. He just walked 15% of the batters he faced last year and struck out 27. So if he can get that down to like 10 and keep the K rate where it is, perfectly good fourth starter with a lot of upside. And then Trevor Rogers, that's another one of my big questions here is, can Trevor Rogers recapture the magic he had in 2021? In 2021, he was 133 innings of Cy Young level nasty pitching, 2.64 ERA, 133 innings, 4.3 F-WAR. And then the last 2 years, he's been hurt. He was hurt essentially all of last year. And when he was healthy pitching in 2022, he was not. He was fine. He was not great. The peripherals looked a lot better than his output. And then in the 18 innings he threw last season, he looked okay. Fangraphs is projecting him for a very modest, like 2-WAR season. He could have been the X factor, because if he pitches anywhere close to what he did in 2021 with like 150 innings, this could legit be a top 5 rotation in the game if Luzardo, Perez, Garrett, Cabrera all kind of trend upward as they have been the past couple of years. And then the bullpen, I don't want to get bogged down on too many specifics, but they have 3 really solid relievers. AJ Puck, who also came over like Luzardo from the A's, and he full-time relief pitcher last year, struck out a ton of guys, was really good. The peripherals looked really nice. And then you pair that with another left. All 3 of these really good relievers are lefties, funny enough. Andrew Nardi, really solid year for them last year, and another guy that just you hope can continue being good. He had a really, really good year last year. Relievers are they're fickle. But this guy, he's young too. He came up in 2022, first like full season as a reliever in the big leagues last year, and he looked really nice. 2.67 ERA and 57 innings pitched. And then the class of this bullpen, who is, I'm safe to say, one of the best relievers in baseball. He was one of the best relievers in baseball last year. That is Tanner Scott, another lefty. Insanely good fastball, like a good slider to pair with it, but his fastball is disgusting. And he had 2.8 WAR as a relief pitcher last year, 78 innings pitched as a reliever, 2.31 ERA with a 2.17 FIP. Just a crazy good year last year. You'd expect him to be maybe not as good this year. If he is as good, that's wild, but I think you can at least expect him to have another good year this year and be one of the better back-end bullpen options in the game. And then they had solid production from JT Chargois last year. Go Mariners. They project to get decent contributions from Ryan Weathers, Anthony Bender. Sixto Sanchez is in this bullpen, who feels like he's been like a rookie prospect for a decade now. Super huge coming into spring training. That was interesting to see. But this bullpen looks, again, like they're going to be solid. And I like this team. I feel like I just am buying into the upside of the offense a little bit. I don't know. They should sign JD Martinez to hit in the DH spot. He did say no to the Giants, so maybe he'd say no to the Marlins, but that would really like just kind of cement this team's floor as a wild card team for me if they had a solid DH option. Because I like the upside in the other positions. I think it's well balanced at the top of the order. I love this pitching staff. I love the back of the bullpen. Big question and the X factor, like, can Jazz Chisholm play a full healthy season? And I think if he plays a full healthy season, even at the same slightly above average output as he did last year, I think that's a success, because he just hasn't been healthy. And you take what you can get after that. And then if they hang in there, do they buy at the deadline again? Be super intrigued to see what happens with that. But I like this Marlins team. Let's go to the over-under. Over-under 78.5. I'm going over. I'm going over 78.5. I'm not going to think about it too much. I'm going over 78.5 for the Miami Marlins. And let's move on to the new team. They're not the new team. They're the New York Mets. The New York Metropolitans. What did they do last year? Well, they spent a bunch of money, got a new owner who just tried to make them competitive as quickly as possible with their current roster that was already expensive. A lot of memes were had on the $350 million roster that went 75 and 87. That's not good. But there were clear problems with this team going into the year that I didn't think would manifest themselves quite as hard as they did, particularly just the old pitching staff really, really did them in. And some regression on some of their hitters as well, and some underwhelming performances from some of their rookie hitters. And their Pythag was 80 and 82, so merely they were just kind of a mid team. They never looked super serious the whole year, but they had a very busy offseason. I think they're going to be better this year than they were last year, but maybe not by much. and I think they could be worse. I think there's still issues with this team that were somewhat addressed and papered over. The rotation got a little bit younger, but I still got some problems with it. But Pacoda thinks they're going to go 83-79, and Fangraphs thinks they're going 81-81. 30% playoff odds from Fangraphs and around 45% from Pacoda. So Pacoda is trending up and thinks this team might make the playoffs. And our wild cards I think it's just going to be a shootout like it was last year. It was a mess last year. It might be again this year, a mess between 84, 85 win teams. A couple, probably 3 potentially from this division that might be in that race. But what did they do? They had a pretty active offseason. They made a couple trades that weren't super, I don't need to talk about them. They weren't super groundbreaking, but they signed a lot of free agents. They also lost a few guys. They lost Trevor Gott, Luis Guillorme, Daniel Vogelbach, Carlos Carrasco, he was awful last year. A few other guys that weren't super integral to the team. And then they signed a few guys, and I actually do, in general, like the signings that they made. I think they didn't pour a bunch of money into any of the big guys, although they could. They certainly still could. The offseason is not over, so I should say that. But they signed a lot of guys that I think help raise the floor of this team. I don't know how much they do for the overall ceiling, but I think the floor has been raised with some of the signings, and some of them were literally just because they had to replace guys who left, particularly in the bullpen and in the pitching staff. But let's get into it. Who did they actually sign, and what does it mean for the team? So they signed 2 pitchers to replace 2 pitchers they had to trade away midseason last year. If you remember, if you know who these guys are, their names are Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer, both older men who both got traded to the AL West last year, much to the chagrin of Mariners fans everywhere. But they were not going to be in it. They kind of just had to get something out of those guys, and they did. To their credit, they got a couple interesting prospects from those trades, but ultimately a failure just to have such an interesting rotation on paper last year going into the year, and it fails. But they signed Sean Manaea and Luis Severino essentially just to take their places. Severino, I think, is a 1-year deal. And Sean Manaea, let me find it, but off the top of my head, it was like a 3-year deal. It was 2 years, $28 million, which I like. And Sevy was 1 year, $13 million. I think I'll get into why I think the Severino signing is super important potentially to this team, but I like Sean Manaea signing. I think Sean Manaea is a floor raiser. I don't think he is going to move mountains here, but I do think he is just a solid pitcher that will be good to have in the middle of a rotation. He might be pitching at the top of this rotation, which I'm not a huge fan of, but that's who they signed to replace those pitchers. And then the other couple signings, they signed Adam Ottavino. They re-signed him. Jake Diekman, Shintaro Fujinami, Jorge Lopez, Austin Adams, all to their bullpen just to kind of fill the bullpen with viable major league arms to hopefully complement a return of one Edwin Diaz, who didn't pitch at all last year thanks to the injury he sustained in the WBC. And the other big-ish money signing, I think it was like $10 million, was Harrison Bader, who I just really like this signing for one reason is because he's going to play really good center field defense. That, again, a floor raiser, especially when considering it shifts Brandon Nimmo to basically full-time left field, where I think he will shine. I don't think he was ever really built to be a really good center fielder. I think he definitely was fine in center field, but I think he's going to be a plus left fielder, which will only help his value to this team. And I think having a stable, really good center fielder, like defensively, is super valuable. And so I did like that Harrison Bader signing, especially because it's like 1 year, $10 million. It'll paper over till next year, and then they'll figure it out. But I like it. I like it just for this season. And then their lineup is projected as this, 1 through 9. Brandon Nimmo leading off from left field, Jeff McNeil at second base, Francisco Lindor at shortstop, Pete Alonso at first base, Starling Marte in right field, DJ Stewart at DH, Francisco Alvarez at catcher, Brett Beatty at third base, and Harrison Bader in the 9-hole at center field. This team is, are they the opposite of the Marlins? Not exactly, but they have different issues. I think the issue with this team is not really the lineup. I think this lineup is pretty solid, especially I think Nimmo, McNeil, Lindor, Alonso is a good 4. After that, it does get a little dicey. But there's at least projectability onto Francisco Alvarez and Brett Beatty. Starling Marte, I think I'm ready to call it on Starling Marte. He had a really awful year last year. I don't know if he'll have a terrible year again this year, but he's not getting any younger. I think Starling Marte is like 36 years old. Really not an encouraging year last year. I think right field's a huge hole. And then right after him in the lineup, DJ Stewart at DH. I also am not what you'd call a DJ Stewart believer. I don't know how many DJ Stewart believers exist. He was like really good at the plate in a pretty small, like 2-month sample. But he was really good in the DH spot last year for the Mets, and I don't exactly know why. So maybe he'll really prove me wrong this year and come out and be a really good full-time DH. But I don't know. I'm not buying that. And then, Brett Beatty, I think a key question I have this year for this team is, can Brett Beatty live up to the prospect hype at the plate? Really struggled last year at the plate. I think if this offense is really going to be where they want it to be, I think they're going to need Brett Beatty to improve upon last year. And I'm not saying he can't. He's 24. He's a rookie. And then Francisco Alvarez showed from the catcher position last year that he is going to be a really solid defensive catcher for this team for a while probably. And I think there were enough flashes offensively that showed you his power and bat-to-ball skills that I think you can project him to be a better offensive player than he was last year. And in his full season last year, he hit 25 home runs. He didn't hit for average, but that's fine. I'd like him maybe just to be a little bit more selective. I mean, he didn't strike out a whole lot. I think he's just going to be a slugger catcher who's just going to hit home runs, probably strike out a decent amount. But I think there was just optimism seeing some of the home runs he hit last year. I mean, he can hit the ball really hard, and to go along with him being a pretty good catcher in terms of throwing guys out, he was pretty solid, but he was an absolutely elite framer last year, and I don't think that will stop. So I think that provides you a really good defensive floor, especially for a rookie. And that's the back half of the lineup. So it's shaky for sure. I think there's improvements to be made at right field and DH. And then you just hope Beatty and Alvarez can progress a little bit offensively this year to at least be average to above average compared to the average major leaguer. Because the group of Nimmo, McNeil, Lindor, and Alonso above them is just a really solid group. I think Nimmo, his only problem since debuting has been health. When he's played, he's been one of the best outfielders in baseball. It's just that, like, he's been really healthy. The last 2 seasons, he's been super healthy, and his output has reflected that. And since debuting, he's just looked so solid at the plate. Just one of the more well-rounded hitters in the game. He's cut his strikeout rate recently. He walks a ton, really good bat-to-ball skills, good amount of pop. And his problem has just been staying on the field. So also I think playing in left and getting a little bit less running in center field, I think that's going to help his health moving forward. And you just, like, if he plays, he's going to be really good. He's constantly, like, he's never had, besides his rookie year, a below average year at the plate. It's just all been about sample size and staying on the field. So I really like Brandon Nimmo. And then Jeff McNeil is, computers hate him. You can't project Jeff McNeil. It's like last year, underwhelming. Year before, really good. Last year, underwhelming. Year before, really good. The computers don't know what to do. He's a contact-oriented guy, pretty BABIP reliant, so I think that makes sense that the computers can't really get it right. And since the trend this year, so the last 4 years, like I said, he was at the plate. I'm just going to read you his WRC plus numbers. So 2018, 2019, 136 and 144. Like one of the better hitters, pure hitters in the game. Like low strikeout rate, league average walk rate, whatever. You know Jeff McNeil. 2020 in the short season, 131 WRC plus. 2021, 91 WRC plus. 2022, 141 WRC plus. 2023, 100 WRC plus. So if the trend continues, this is another good Jeff McNeil year at age 32. And then the two guys behind him, Lindor and Alonso. I mean, I love Francisco Lindor. Since debuting, he has been one of my absolute favorite players in baseball, and he's just continued to be a staple of what a shortstop should be. And also a cherry on top is he's just like a face of baseball type guy. He smiles everything he does. He's just an awesome dude and just such a well-rounded baseball player offensively and defensively. Has just been a joy to watch and is, again, maybe the most stable option right now at shortstop in baseball on both sides of the ball. And then Pete Alonso, we know what Pete Alonso is, man. He's just been one of the best power hitters for years now. Stable first baseman option for this Mets team. One of my big questions, though, since he's in the last year of his contract, a lot of trade talk last year, some trade buzz this offseason. He's still on the team. If there's sellers at the deadline, you'd think they have to sell Pete Alonso. You'd think they have to, and a team like the Mariners might be calling. But I think that's a big question. Is Pete Alonso on this team after the trade deadline passes? I don't know. So that's their offense with, they signed Joey Wendell, utility guy for the bench. They traded for Tyrone Taylor, outfielder, will provide good defense. Mark Vientos, third base, first base, DH, with some upside. He's one where he could fill the DH role, potentially, if he just really explodes and develops really well this year. And then Omar Narvaez is a backup catcher with a pretty solid option. So I think the offense is fine. I think the offense is good. I think it's going to be serviceable this year. I think they should try to address right field and DH, but whatever. And then we get to the pitching staff. Boy, Kodai Senga was awesome last year. Cy Young level pitcher, amazing to watch. The Ghost Fork is electric. He has a shoulder injury right now. And so I have him on my cheat sheet as maybe Kodai Senga as they're in the opening day rotation. It's a strained shoulder, so I don't know if this is going to morph into a worse injury or not. But with him at the top of the rotation, it's still kind of a weak rotation. And with him out, the rotation goes Jose Quintana, Luis Severino, Sean Manaea, Adrian Hauser, and Tyler McGill. Adrian Hauser and Tyler McGill don't do anything for me. I think they're fine fourth and fifth options on a team if the starters above them are a little bit better than the ones I read. I feel like all five of these guys are back of the rotation starters for better teams with better pitching. Jose Quintana is your opening day starter. Yeah, that's just not good, man. In 2024, no less. I mentioned Luis Severino. I talked about Sean Manaea earlier. I mentioned Luis Severino. He is my X factor for this team because they signed him to a 1 year, I guess you could say it's a prove it type of year. He's the X factor because if he's struggled mightily with injuries after his two best seasons in 2017 and 2018 with the Yankees, where he was a Cy Young type of pitcher. Amazing production, super durable. Since then, he's really struggled with injuries, and when he's pitched, it's been okay. When he pitched in 2022 for about half the year for the Yanks, he was really good. Again, when he pitched last year for around 90 innings, he was awful. He was genuinely terrible to watch pitch. And so I don't exactly know what to expect from him going into this year. Fangraphs is projecting him for a roughly league average season and around 140 innings pitched. If he can be healthy and pitch 140 plus and skew closer to the 2022 production, that he had. I don't know if he's ever going to reach the heights that he did years ago on the Yankees, but if he can be close to 2022 production with more innings, that could be super key for this team this year, especially if Kodai Senga comes back healthy and pitching like he did last year. Like, that would be huge for this team. And I think if he doesn't, it's real bad. Then the rotation could get bad real quick, because you look at the depth at the rotation too. I have big problems with, like, Joey Lucchesi, who was really nice out of the bullpen last year, is probably another emergency starter along with David Peterson. And then after that, it's like, I don't know, man. I don't know who starts if guys go down. So hoping the Kodai Senga injury is... Oh, David Peterson. No, he's on the 60-day IL. But is he coming back? I don't know. Hopefully the Senga injury isn't too bad, because that would be real bad. And then the bullpen, I think the bullpen's fine. Brooks Raley is a good relief pitcher. Adam Ottavino is a good relief pitcher. Drew Smith, also fine. Shintaro Fujinami, super interesting. Was way better moving to the bullpen last year after being a starter, come with the A's and then getting traded to the Orioles. Just tantalizing stuff. Just insane stuff. Struggle with command, but definitely fit to be a reliever. So huge upside there, I think. At least he'll be interesting. And then Edwin Diaz, he's back. That's another one of my big questions. What does Edwin Diaz look like post-injury? He missed all of last year. What does he look like? Fangraphs are projecting him for a 2.2 WAR season, 2.7 ERA. Like, they're projecting him to be fully back to Edwin Diaz supremacy in the closer position. Not probably close to the 2022 production, because you don't really project that, or the 2018 with the Mariners. Like, you don't really project a season like that. Like, that's an absurd season. Could he do it again? Maybe. I don't know what to say about it, because he could. We've seen what he's done. It's just missing a full year. I hope he's back with the same velocity. It's always more fun in baseball when Edwin Diaz is healthy and pitching. But I see some bullpen depth issues, and like with any bullpen, the relievers I named that I think are fine could absolutely fall off a cliff and die this year. That's always an option, especially looking at the age of these relievers. Like, Brooks Raley is like 35. I think Adam Ottavino is almost 40. Drew Smith is 30. Jake Diekman is 37. Jorge Lopez is old. Shintaro Fujinami is not a spring chicken. He's a rookie in MLB last year, but he's like 30. I see problems with this pitching staff, especially if Kodai Senga is going to miss significant time with a shoulder injury. And just looking at this over-under at 82.5, that is a very easy under for me. Honestly, that's a pretty easy under. I don't see this team winning more than 82.5. And that's that for the Mets. Another thing that sucks, Ronnie Mauricio, 2022 LIDOM MVP, I will note. He's out for the whole year. He tore his ACL playing in LIDOM, I think, this year in January. And so he's out for the whole year, which really sucks, because he's one of those guys that can hit the absolute piss out of the baseball. He hit one like 118 miles an hour last year or something stupid like that. He's going to miss the whole year, and he would have been an interesting infield / DH option for this team too. So that hurts in terms of just a young player who you'd want to see have some time to develop. He's just not going to have it this year. So that stinks. But I'm closing the curtain on these Mets. I'm going under 82.5, and we will move on to the Philadelphia Phillies. The Fightin' Phils. The Philadelphia Phillies had a 2023 record of 90-72 and a Pythagorean of 89-73, so they hit it almost right on there. Good team. Good baseball team right here. Very interesting team, but a solid one. Very fun to watch. Notably, they live and die by being electric in the playoffs. They were amazing against the Marlins and then flamed out in the next round. And going into this year, not much has changed. Not much at all, really. I think they project again to be a good team, but modest projections for this team, which just makes sense given like how they're kind of built around so much offense, But Pacoda and Fangraphs, another consensus here of 85 and 77, both around 57% playoff odds as well for this team. So I think they're healthily projecting them to be a wild card team in the mid-80s win total. And what did they do in free agency? Well, they recently picked up Whit Merrifield, which I think is a really good signing. Waited a long time, got him just as a utility guy. I think super useful, especially he's not going to be made to start at all, at least heading into the season. He's going to be full-time utility going into the year. I think that's his best position at this stage of his career. They signed 2 starting pitchers, Spencer Turnbull and Colby Allard, who will be depth pieces, who I think are needed for being a good team in the long run, like they want to be this year. And then they brought back Aaron Nola almost immediately into the offseason. It was one of the first signings that maybe the first big signing of the offseason. They brought him back. That's their guy, $150 million salary, or $172 over 7 years. Point is, they brought back their guy who was so good in the playoffs for them last year. And they basically brought back most of their team. They lost Rhys Hoskins to free agency, although he was hurt already, so we knew he was going to be gone. They lost Craig Kimbrell and Corey Knebel out of their bullpen, and Michael Lorenzen, who was they traded for at the deadline from the Tigers last year. And then they also lost Josh Harrison to free agency, who, I don't think he played a whole lot for them last year. And just getting in straight away to their offense or projected lineup, 1 through 9, Kyle Schwarber, the most unique leadoff hitter in baseball at the DH spot, Trey Turner at shortstop, Bryce Harper at first base, Nick Castellanos in the 4 hole in right field, Alec Boehm at third base, Bryson Stott at second base, JT Realmuto at catcher, and Brandon Marsh in left field with Johan Rojas in center. And it's an interesting lineup. It's familiar. We've seen at least the big hitters in this lineup on this team for a while now. A couple changes with Johan Rojas scooting out there to center field, projecting on the opening day lineup with Brandon Marsh in left field. And the rest of this team really was very similar to last year. I think you saw pretty solid seasons from a couple younger fellas in Alec Boehm and Bryson Stott last year, who I think it's perfect that this offense doesn't ask a whole lot out of these guys. They can sit in the 6, 7, 8 spots of this lineup and just be good at what they do. Alec Boehm having his best offensive season as a big leaguer last year really showed that he is just he's one of those guys who doesn't strike out much, and he walks a decent amount, and he has some pop. And he plays a not amazing third base, but it's the Phillies. They don't care about defense. And then Bryson Stott at second baseman, who had a really good year last year. He played really nice defense at second base, similar to Alec Boehm in that he doesn't strike out a whole lot, and he walks around league average. He doesn't quite have as much pop. He really is kind of the second baseman version at the plate of Alec Boehm. He's similar in K percentage, walk percentage, but doesn't hit for as much power. But he's really fast. He stole 31 bases last year. Really good defense. Really solid season for the Phillies last year. Really like Bryson Stott. And then the cream of the crop of this offense, Schwarber, Turner, Harper, Castellanos. 1 through 4, those are big boppers. Like Kyle Schwarber, on-base dinger machine at the leadoff. And Bryce Harper, we're going to see him hopefully a full season at first base. After his injury, he played first base last year. It was awesome there. Just fit right in to first base after coming back from his injury, and was pretty much Bryce Harper at the plate. He had a 142 WRC plus in 126 games. That's pretty Bryce Harper like. And we can just kind of expect that again this year. He is only 31 years old, which is absurd to think about, because I remember the Bryce Harper Sports Illustrated cover from when I was, oh man, I must have been in elementary school at that point. And then Nick Castellanos right behind him, who we know who Nick Castellanos is. I mean, he can hit really well, not play great defense, and is a very interesting fella who's points at his son every time he hits a home run. Nick Castellanos doesn't hide who he is. I saved Trey Turner for last to talk about in this lineup because, as you probably know if you followed baseball last year, super interesting year for Trey Turner. Really, really bad to start the year. Really not a good opening half of a season. First year of that $300 million contract in front of the most vicious fan base in baseball. And he was pretty awful at the plate. And then they cheered for him one day, and all of a sudden, he's one of the best hitters in baseball over the second half of the year. He was a man alive in the second half. His first half numbers, 88 games. He had a 687 OPS. And in the second half, in 67 games, he had a 902 OPS. 16 home runs in that span. Just ridiculously important for this team down the stretch as they were vying for the playoffs again. They ended up winning 90 games, a large part due to Trey Turner coming into his own and Bryce Harper just being Bryce Harper after missing the first 2 months of the year. And I don't want to get too hung up on this offense. This is a good offense. And the back half of it, Brandon Marsh and Johan Rojas, Johan Rojas was fine at the plate last year in his small sample. I think he offers good center field defense. Brandon Marsh started the year crazy hot last year at the plate, and finished with what was a really, really good season. Not something that I don't think anyone really expected out of Brandon Marsh. I mean, he's scorching hot, and then he kind of just continued being a good hitter the rest of the year. I don't know exactly what to expect from him this season. Fangraphs is expecting him to kind of fall back to earth at the plate, but I think he's going to be good defensively on the base path, and he's the wettest guy in baseball, so there's that. And then this leads me to the last guy in this offense before I talk about the pitching, my X factor, JT Realmuto. JT Realmuto is my X factor for the Philadelphia Phillies. Why? Because he was uncharacteristically not JT Realmuto like last year, if that makes any sense to you. He really didn't have a great year. And I think he's the X factor because if he is more the JT Realmuto that we know and we love of years past, this team won 90 games last year. I feel like they would have won 95 if it was a vintage Realmuto year. I mean, he was just really meh at the plate. Just looking at his numbers, I have his numbers in front of me. He struck out more. He walked less. He hit for less power. And that is alarming enough. But what was also real bad is his framing fell off a cliff last year. He has consistently been one of the best catchers, maybe the best catcher in Major League Baseball for 5-6 years now. Both sides of the ball. Solid hitter, but just insanely good blocking catcher. The best catcher in baseball in terms of pop time and throwing guys out at second, stealing, and has been an elite framer for a while. And just to give you some context, these are his framing runs from 2019 on. 21, 5, 7, 13, and then this season, -9. Just framing off of a cliff. And so if he can get back to being a really good pitch framer and maybe cut the strikeouts this year, I hope that's not a trend. of his strikeouts rising and his walks falling, because it kind of looks like it could be. He is like 33. I mean, a lot of miles on him, especially like he's a catcher. That's even more laborsome. I'm a little worried, if I'm being honest. I'm a little worried about JT Realmuto this season, which is why I think is the X factor. If he kind of bounces back, that could be good. I think what might be key here is the framing. I don't really know what happened. I don't know how you go from an elite framer to -9 framing runs in a year. I genuinely don't exactly understand what happened. So I think it's kind of huge for not only him and the lineup to kind of pick it up offensively, but he's the X factor, because if he is another bad framing pitcher, that's just like kind of not ideal. He's still going to throw guys out. That's still not an issue. But if he gets back to being an elite framer, that really picks up the pitching staff in a big way. So that's why I think he's the X factor of the team. But that's the lineup. I don't think there are any concerns on this lineup being good again this year. They'll be fun to watch. And moving on to the pitching staff. An interesting pitching staff. Really good at the top. Aaron Nola, Zach Wheeler, Ranger Suarez, your top three. Between Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler, those are two elite pitchers. Ranger Suarez has just been really good for the past few years. Really solid, stable number three. And then Taijuan Walker and Christopher Sanchez. Taijuan Walker has been he's been fairly stable and just as a 4 or 5 starter in your rotation at this point, I think that's fine. He really is such a different pitcher than he was so long ago. He has become a predominantly splitter cutter pitcher, which has really helped him induce a lot of soft contact. He doesn't strike out as many guys anymore, but a lot softer contact and better output from him. And then Christopher Sanchez, who had a very nice season last year. I don't think he was technically a rookie. I think it was just his second year service time wise, but put together nice output in about half a season of pitching. So I can assume if he even does that again as your 5 pitcher, that's perfectly fine. I'm like very okay with this starting rotation. I think bringing back Nola was huge, and I think you have Spencer Turnbull and Colby Allard as your backup arms that they signed this year, which is like fine. I think those guys can pitch innings. I think they could have more, like Mick Abel, I guess, might be another backup arm for them this year. And yeah, I don't have a lot of concerns for this pitching staff, although one of my big questions is, can Aaron Nola rebound off of, he didn't have a bad year last year. I will just preface with saying he had a good year. He had a perfectly good year. It was just not an Aaron Nola type of year. He did the thing where he pitched almost 200 innings. Again, been probably him and Garrett Cole, the most durable pitchers in baseball for a long time now. But just his numbers weren't as good. I mean, you had a 4.46 ERA, 3.77 expected ERA, 4.03 FIP. So maybe some batted ball luck. He gave up a lot of home runs last year, which is maybe a little fluky. I don't know if you really go from 0.8 home runs per 9 to 1.5 without it being a little bit of a fluke, but he was walking guys a little bit more this year, allowing more base runners. So I feel like he'll still be durable, but if he can get back to closer to his output last year, or I think he's still going to be a valuable pitcher, but can he bounce back after a somewhat underwhelming year? I mean, he's still at 3.9 F-WAR, like, for Christ's sake, but I'm just nitpicking here. That was another question. Because if he pitches like 2022 Nola with Zach Wheeler right next to him, and the back three of that rotation is like a pretty solid group, it'd be a really well-rounded team, which is something you wouldn't hear me say of the Phillies 1 to 2 years ago. Then you get into the bullpen. Brought back a lot of the same guys. They traded for Gregory Soto last year. He's going to be in the bullpen for a full season for them this year. Really solid relief pitcher. Jeff Hoffman, the same thing. Will likely throw a lot of innings for them this year. Was great for them last year. And then their closer, Jose Alvarado, who is awesome to watch. Just really electric closer. Really, really nice stuff. Really good a couple years for the Phillies. Hopefully we'll continue to have a good year. Jeff Hoffman. Jeff Hoffman was so good last year. I don't know how many of you know who Jeff Hoffman is, but boy, he was nice last year. Like him, Soto, and Alvarado as your back of the bullpen battery, really nice. And then to complement Sir Anthony Dominguez, who had a little bit worse year last year than the year before, but he's a reliever, volatile. And then you have Matt Strahm, who is your swing man type, who is going to be again probably a super valuable member of this bullpen as a emergency starting pitcher / swing man. Like he's a swing man. He can start, he can relief, long relief, really valuable to this team, and really good pitch. Really good pitch last year? No, really good pitching year last year. And then the only other relief pitcher I really want to talk about here is Orion Kerkering, who came up last season, got a little taste of Major League Ball. He threw 3 innings, but you saw why he's a really highly touted reliever. He has a good fastball. He throws it really hard, like 99 miles an hour, but his slider is... how do I describe it? His slider, should I say Matt Brash-esque? To compare it to one of the best sliders in today's game, I will. It's Matt Brash-esque. It's like an 80-grade slider. It is a nasty, nasty pitch, and I would, right now, if you haven't seen it, I'd go look it up. It looks disgusting, and so I'm really excited to watch Ryan Kerkering in the bullpen this year. That's just an addition from the farm from last year that I think will only help. I really like this team. I really, really like this Phillies team. I feel like the pitching this year is going to be better than it has been the past 2 years. I think the 85 and 77 projections from these computers is low. I'm trying to figure out why. I think it's just factoring in some regression from like Castellanos and even Realmuto, some more regression. And I don't think it loves their other outfielders, Brandon Marsh and Johan Rojas. I think it wants some regression. It doesn't want it. It's projecting Brandon Marsh to not have as good of a year. And like depth-wise, their bench is okay. I just feel like it's also the Phillies and a Dave Dombrowski team, so if they need to add a outfielder or a bat at the deadline, they likely will, and there could be some available, so I wouldn't put it past them. I like this team. I like this team a lot. What is their over-under? It's 90.5. Ah, jeez. It's 90.5? Oh, that sucks. I was looking at the projections, like if it's 87.5 or something, I'm smashing the over, but 90.5, I got to think about it a little bit more. Oh, God. 90.5. I just talked about how much I really like them. I'm going to go over. I'm going to go over 90.5. That is... I'm not 100% confident in that. I do really like this team. No, I'm going to go over. I'm going to stick with it. Over 90.5. And we'll move on to the projected number 1 team in baseball in this division, the Atlanta Braves. And honestly, I don't think I'm going to talk about this team too much. It's the Braves. They won 104 games last year. Their Pythagorean was 101.61, so that's absurd. They're projected by Pacoda 101.61 this year. Fangraphs has them a little bit more modestly, 98.63. 99% playoff odds from both of those systems, just about, for good reason. And like, what did they do this offseason? They had a really interesting offseason, though. That's what I will say. I don't think I'm going to get too hung up on their lineup because, I mean, listen, y'all know their lineup. It's stupid good. But offseason wise, what they did in free agency was not as interesting as what they did in the trade market. But free agency, they lost Kirby Yates, Colby Allard, Michael Tonkin, Kevin Pillar, Jesse Chavez, Brad Hand, Eddie Rosario, And then who did they get in free agency? 3 relief pitchers, Reynaldo Lopez, Joe Jimenez, and Pierce Johnson. All really good signings, in my opinion. I think that absolutely shores up their bullpen for this year. And they also talked about, with some back of the rotation questions, they talked about when they signed Reynaldo Lopez, they might try to stretch him out into a starter. So that's a potentially starter signing. But trade-wise, good Lord, they were active. This is the most active trade team I had to write about in my little Excel spreadsheet this year. They traded for Aaron Bummer, another relief pitcher who, again, it makes this bullpen look absolutely disgusting. They traded for Aaron Bummer, who's been one of the better lefty relief pitchers in baseball the past few years. They traded about 6 players to the White Sox for him. Not going to get hung up on who. They traded for and away a few different players. They traded for Jackson Kowar from the Royals. They traded Jackson Kowar and Cole Phillips to the Mariners for Marco Gonzalez, Evan White, and Jared Kelenic. They traded Evan White and Tyler Thomas to the Angels for Max Stassi and David Fletcher. They then traded Max Stassi to the White Sox. They traded Marco Gonzalez to the Pirates. They traded Drew Campbell to the Padres for Ray Kerr and Matt Carpenter. And then I think they cut Matt Carpenter. They traded Tyler Owens to the Rangers for J.P. Martinez. And then I guess the biggest trade, besides that one Mariners one with Kelenic, is Vaughn Grissom to the Red Sox for Chris Sale. I thought Vaughn Grissom was the shortstop of the future for this team, but I guess they thought against that. I think they're just okay with Orlando Arcia being their shortstop, despite what he might say in the locker room that Jake Mintz accurately reports on and people get mad about. But they get Chris Sale. But that was all their trades. Like, good Lord, they made so many trades. And just kind of bizarre. They took on a lot of money. They shipped a lot of money out. They did a lot of mixing and matching with, like, AAA kind of 40-man-ish roster guys to arrive at still the best roster in baseball. I'll read you their lineup 1 through 9. Ronald Acuna Jr. at right field. Ozzie Albies at second base. Austin Riley at third base. Matt Olson at first base. Marcelo Zuna at DH. Michael Harris at center field. Sean Murphy at catcher. Jared Kelenic in left field. And Orlando Arcia at shortstop. And my God, Ronald Acuna Jr. is projected for 7.4 F/WAR. That is insane. Genuinely. I'm not saying it's wrong. That's just to see a projection for that much is crazy, but it makes sense. He won MVP last year. He had a 40-70 season, which is something we've never seen before, and was one of the most fun seasons of baseball I've ever seen in my entire life. There were questions of how healthy he'd be last year on top of what he'd be production-wise, and boy, did he blow everything out of the water. He cut his strikeout rate in half. He hit for more power. He stole more bases. He walked slightly more. He was just a force. 170 WRC plus. 8.3 WAR, 41 stolen bases, or 41 home runs, 73 stolen bases. Nearly 150 runs, 106 RBIs. Just a crazy year from Acuna, and I'm sure he'll do something similar this year. He's projected to put up a 40-50 season this year. Projected. Projections are often modest. And then Ozzie Albies, Austin Riley, Matt Olson, Sean Murphy, Michael Harris, all guys who are some of the best, if not the best players at that position in baseball. I don't even want to talk about them in detail, really. Matt Olson hit nearly 60 home runs last year. Just an awesome guy to watch wallop home runs. I think wallop is the right term I'd use for his swing. It's like Fred Flintstone swinging his club. I think it's similar to Kyle Tucker. It's just like a big sweeping swing. It's awesome to watch. Can he hit 60 home runs this year? I don't know. He got kind of close last year. Michael Harris is great. Sean Murphy is great. Austin Riley is great. Ozzie Albies is great. And Ozzie Albies is getting paid minimum wage to be an elite second baseman. Ronald Acuna, too, also kind of getting paid minimum wage to be the best player in baseball. And then, like, the kind of question marks, like Marcell Ozuna, I guess, at DH is somewhat of, like, I don't know, is he going to be still good? He's aging. He was really good at the plate last year. I feel like he doesn't produce quite as much this year, but I think he's still probably easily going to be an above-average hitter. Orlando Arcia is kind of a question mark. I mean, he had a really good defensive year last year. He looked really solid at shortstop, so I feel like they'll take that with modest offensive production. And then I guess the biggest question mark here is left field, where Jared Kelenic seems poised to have that opening day left field spot with probably Forrest Wall and Marcell Ozuna getting some time there. But Jared Kelenic, opportunity for him. I think this is a better spot for him than the Mariners. He's spoken a lot about how he's happy to be there, and I think it's just huge for him that he's hitting 8th in this order of insane offensive players. If he's even league average, that will be fine for them. If he's better than league average, that's best case. There's going to be no pressure on him at all to be a really good player, and I think they clearly have a good production system going on down there with hitters, and I think I don't know. I'm not, again, you know this about me. I'm not super high on Jared Kelenic, but I guess he's their biggest offensive question mark, and I don't have much more to say about this offense. It's insane. Travis d'Arnaud has been the best backup catcher in baseball for a few years now. He's been great. And yeah. Moving on to the rotation where there could be question marks. Spencer Strider, a Cy Young favorite, had some batted ball luck go against him last year, gave up a decent amount of home runs, but had 800 strikeouts and is amazing to watch. Max Fried, we might get to see a full Max Fried season this year, and he was really good when he came back last year from injury. It looked like classic Max Fried. So that 1-2 is one of the better ones in baseball. And then my X factor is the back of this rotation. It's Charlie Morton, Chris Sale, and Bryce Elder. And for a couple different reasons, that is my X factor. I don't really think this team has much of an X factor. The floor is so high, I don't really see a whole lot of variables influencing the outcomes on this team, I guess. But the back of the rotation, I guess there are question marks. On top of those three guys I named, they have AJ Smith-Shawver and Dylan Dodd, two young fellas ready to pitch in the major league level for this team as depth arms, and we should probably expect to see them a little bit this year. But Charlie Morton is 40 years old. Can he continue being a good pitcher? It's been kind of crazy watching him go through his career and just age like a fine wine, really, and have another really solid year for them last year. But he's 40, and that is something to consider when projecting his season this year. And then Bryce Elder, who had a really nice year last year as a rookie. I think he was technically a rookie, although he pitched in 2022. I am not super high on Bryce Elder. He had a very low ERA for a lot of the year. He pitched a lot. He's just not really a strikeout guy. He gets a lot of contact. He doesn't throw very hard. I don't like him that much, pitching-wise. I don't like a low strikeout, low velocity kind of control guy in this day and age. But as a fifth starter, okay. And then Chris Sale, I think, is the real wild card of this rotation, because if Chris Sale's problem has never been being good or not on the mound. It's always been health with Chris Sale the past 4 years ish. I don't think we're ever going to see vintage Chris Sale again. I feel like the ship has sailed on that, which is fair. I don't think we're ever going to see 220 innings of 3 flat ERA with 13 strikeouts per 9 again. I don't think we're going to see that. But when he's pitched the past couple of years, he's been really good. When he pitched last year in 100 innings, he was good. He was a good pitcher. And so if they can manage to keep him healthy for a lot of the year, and he's 35, that would be huge for this rotation. Just taking if he just ends up eating innings at a pretty good clip, like I think he probably can, and he's proven he can still pitch well if he's on the mound, that'd be huge for them. And then getting into the bullpen, this bullpen is just so good. They shored it up amazingly this offseason. Raisel Iglesias and AJ Minter carry over from the last couple of years with this team. Raisel Iglesias they got from the Angels in 2022 in a trade, but he has been their closer. Really good closer, classic closer. AJ Minter from a southpaw reliever, as good as you're gonna get. And then Reynaldo Lopez, Joe Jimenez, and Pierce Johnson, the guys they all got in free agency, all are above average relief pitchers. Tyler Matzik, Aaron Bummer, and Jackson Stevens as their other three projected opening day relief pitchers all seem perfectly adequate, and there won't be a whole lot of high leverage for those guys. Maybe Aaron Bummer, but they have so many other good relief options. I don't see them really being hoisted into high leverage. And really, I'm kind of done talking about this team. It's disgusting. It really is. It's going to be a really good team again. Their over-under is 101.5, and I'm going to take the over on that. I'm going to take the over. This team is crazy good. I'm excited to watch them again. Strider and Acuna as your two best players basically is just as electric as you can get. And yeah, that's that for the NL East in this division. I have the Braves going over 101.5, the Phillies going over 90.5, the Marlins going over 78.5, the Mets going under 82.5, and the Nationals going under 66.5. And that is my division order. Nationals in 5th, Mets in 4th, Marlins in 3rd, Phillies in 2nd, and Braves in 1st. That is the NL East. The AL West preview is coming on Friday. And have a good week in the meantime, and prepare to hear me talk about how the Oakland A's will surprise us all in 2024. Thanks for listening.